Hello, and thank you for joining us today for O3 Solutions webinar, Overcoming the Challenges of AWP, presented by Andrew Foy. So today we're going to cover the challenges of AWP, but first we're going to do a quick safety moment. Then I'll provide a brief overview of who O3 is, and then I'm going to introduce Andrew, and then he is going to walk you through the top 10 challenges with AWP, including solutions and then some software to support it. And then he'll hit the key takeaways, and if we have time, or time permitting, we'll answer as many questions as we can. So with that in mind, please submit your questions throughout the presentation using the GoToWebinar panel. There's a little questions tab you can submit there, and we will get to those at the end. So, quick safety moment as we enter the Memorial Day holiday here in the US. A lot of people will be traveling on the road, so I thought this was maybe a little timely. Some few tips to keep in mind, just to always be prepared. Prepare your home before you leave. Make sure your home's safe and you leave it in good order before you head out. Always have your car inspected or serviced, and always keep an emergency kit inside of it. Know how to drive safely on icy roads as well as hot roads. I know ice is not typically a problem right now in May, depending on what part of the world you're in, but hot roads can also be a hazard. If it just rains, it can become slick as well. Plan the drive ahead of time and know alternate routes. Always make frequent rest stops. Carry a cell phone and a charger. Always stay hydrated. Wash your hands frequently. And give someone close to you a copy of your itinerary so that you can have some people that know where you are. So now, who is O3? We are the market-leading agile software built specifically to support advanced work packaging. It's the only solution on the market with true work package management. No matter the size of the project, from small cap to mega projects, O3 is scalable and can support your AWP maturity journey. And this is Andrew Foy. He's going to be presenting today. He is the VP of AWP and Construction here at O3 Solutions. He's got over 16 years of experience in industrial construction, with 6 years dedicated to AWP implementation experience for a range of owner organizations. He's the CII AWP Performance and Benchmarking Committee co-chair and the CII AWP CBA leadership team member. So thank you for joining us, Andrew. And with that, I will turn it over to you to begin the presentation.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Tori. And hello, good morning, good afternoon to everybody. As Tori mentioned, today we're going to cover the top 10 challenges in AWP and, more importantly, how to overcome them. So, challenge number one, diving straight in. Lack of understanding about what AWP is and how it helps. So this is a very simple one where, do your people actually know what AWP is? Do they understand its purpose? Are they sold on it, or are they just doing it because they're told to? Oftentimes you'll find contractors who, we're doing it because the contract said we had to. It's a very reluctant approach. Do they see the value? Do they understand the benefit, the payback, the importance of it to your organization and how it can impact the project and the project goals? And do they know what it means to them? Everybody will always look at this sort of change management exercise through the lens of, what does this do to me? Is this going to make my job easier or harder? Is this going to be a computer that replaces me? You know, those are all the questions that whir around in people's minds. So how to overcome this challenge? The easiest solution, the most practical solution to this is training. Training is the most consistent method to address this kind of thing. You need to train all of your project stakeholders, anybody who's going to have a say or an involvement in AWP. And there are different levels of training, different types of training. So typically we break this down to awareness training, which is for those people who need to know what it is, need to understand the basics of it, but they're not going to be in it and using it day to day. And then practitioner level training, that's going to be the people who are actually in there executing AWP on a project and playing an active role in its success. O3 partners up with the Concord Academy, who provides online self-paced training for both advanced work packaging and workplace planning. They have a range of courses that you can take. You can run them all in your own pace. So they're all videos you can listen through to. There's tests at the end of each section. And by the end of each of these, you'll have a different understanding of the various levels of AWP. So you can take, for example, AWP 101 for that awareness training, or you can go through the full fundamentals course to get a proper level of practitioner training. O3 also has software that can allow you to manage the course load for people. It doesn't just have to be AWP training. You can use our on-course tool to record and manage everything that somebody needs to be trained in. So if you're doing a job where you need to have a bunch of people need to have confined space training or working from heights training or any other tickets or things that get expired over time, you can manage all of that and track the renewals, the required courses, and who's available to do what and who is successful at doing what. You can track all of that in on-course. Okay, challenge number 2. And this is a big one, overselling the upside. Everybody, when they hear about AWP, focuses on that banner headline that came out from CII. So when they announced AWP as best practice, the headline was, AWP can save you up to 10% of your TIC, 25% of your labor costs, which equates to about 10% of your TIC. The issue is, some people will believe that they will get this the first time out. Immediately as they implement AWP, day one, press play, and I'm going to save 10% of my TIC. Really scary. I've seen some projects where they will actually reduce their estimate before they've even executed AWP, which is typically quite dangerous. So you need to be careful how you're selling it to senior management. I've done jobs in the past where our only expectation was that we used AWP as a risk mitigation exercise. We didn't promise any savings. We said, if we do this, we are more likely to hit our budget, which for a lot of projects, especially large projects, that is success. So be very, very careful about overselling the upside. So how can you manage this? Effective ROI. So firstly, you have to understand, and this is what this graph is showing, this is from the CII. There are different levels of maturity. You do not get those great big savings until you get to the highest level of AWP maturity. You get savings in effective performance improvements at the early stages, but to really get to that top end, you have to have it to the point where AWP has become a business approach within your organization. So you have to recognize and understand the maturity curve for AWP implementation. You have to be able to understand and calculate your return on investment. So you need to be able to look at, there are costs associated with doing AWP, and there's going to be value. You need to be able to calculate what those two things are. O3 has an ROI tool, and one of the key things with that ROI tool is it scales with maturity and AWP type. So you can select and say, this is the first time we're doing AWP, and all we're doing is workplace planning. Or we've been doing AWP for years, and we're going to do full AWP for the full project lifecycle. Those things will provide different results in terms of the effective ROI for the project. And then we also have implementation aids that are available to you to help with things like building a business case. So when you're flagging this up to management and saying we want to be able to do this AWP, you have to be able to explain what the value is to them. And then you need to be able to track its success. And that's going to be a data-driven exercise. If you say, we will use this to improve our safety performance or our installation rate for pipe and steel, you need a method to be able to track that. And O3 software will give you these very detailed dashboards, and you can have metrics that show, here's where we were before, here's our performance on this job, here's the improvement over time, etc. So that kind of dashboarding information, that level of reporting in detail will help justify after the fact your value in using AWP. Okay, challenge number 3, and this is a very, very common one. I've had a lot of people say to me over the years, we're starting our job in, we're mobilizing to the construction site next week and we're going to do AWP. Well, no, you're not. You're doing what's referred to as workplace planning. So there is a difference between AWP and workplace planning. AWP is the entire project lifecycle, right from early FEL2 or pre-feed feed, select, define, depending on what terminology you use, all the way up to commissioning and completions. Work phase planning is just the construction piece. It's just the execute phase installation scope. That's the field construction portion. So that's where it all started. It started with work phase planning, and then there was this drive to sort of pull it back into the engineering stages because they realized the value is going to come from aligning engineering with construction. The A stands for advanced for a very good reason. It's best to start early. So what you need to look for here is what we would refer to as phase-specific solutions. And by that we mean, for the first thing, use an AWP approach that spans the project phases. Understand what you need to do in each phase of the project to support AWP. You're not going to be able to do it all day one, and you're not going to get value if you leave it all to the end. You're going to you want to develop procedures for the actions and the deliverables in each phase. You need to have a clearly written expectation of, in this phase, you shall do this, 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 and this. In fact, we've got such a procedure right on our website. You can download it for free. And then you can pair that with AWP software that's going to provide value throughout the whole journey, throughout the whole project lifecycle. So we have different modules of O3. So on plan is during the early FEL stages. On design is what's used during detailed design. On build is, as you can well imagine, the construction phase. And on start is testing and turnout. On build is where it gets really, really interesting, because this is where you're using it for the work phase planning. This is the tool that you're using to build these field level IWPs. You're using a 3D model, you're clicking on different elements and you're adding them to a work package. And then immediately the software can pull the drawings, create a material list, and automatically estimate the number of hours that are associated with each package. It greatly simplifies the process of building those IWPs. It can turn it into a matter of minutes. You build it in the model and you flip over to these screens here and start putting some of that additional data in for things like constraints and scope of work, etc. Challenge number 4, starting too late. So as we've talked about, the advanced part means starting early. It is a declining value proposition depending on when you start. It's a lot like a constructability curve. If any of you have seen that constructability curve where the value of constructability goes down the later you do it and the cost goes up, it's exactly the same with AWP. If you start AWP early, you're going to have the best amount of value and it's not going to cause a lot of churn, a lot of rework. If you do it later and later in the project, like if you begin during the start of FEL3 or FEED, you're still in a good spot. If you get to halfway through detailed design and suddenly start saying, hey, we're going to do this AWP thing, it's going to create a lot of churn, a lot of rework, and you've already missed out on a lot of the value. The most value I've ever seen and experienced from AWP is when we started. As soon as you've got concept select, as soon as you've got a decent plot plan halfway through FEL2. So again, the A stands for advanced for a good reason. If you start during construction, you can still save money, you can still get productivity gains, but they will be precipitously lower than if you'd started early on. So how do you get past this? What's the solution for this challenge? Is recognizing the benefits of AWP during FEL. So AWP can be a very, very, very useful tool during FEL. This is when you're building the building blocks for AWP success. You're creating your construction work areas. You're defining your work breakdown structure and your CWP matrix and your EWP matrix. You are most critically doing a path of construction. How do we want to install this? Left to right, north to south, top down, start over here and work over here. You're getting the construction input in early, and you're starting to layer on understanding of things like what's our contracting strategy, what's our fabrication plan, what are our turnaround plans, to the point where you understand the granularity of the work, who's going to be awarded what, where each set of scope is going to be executed, and then you can get that breakdown of how your work packaging will support that level of granularity. So doing all of this during FEL is very, very important. And you can leverage technology to improve this delivery. So the technology is never going to replace smart people who understand how to do construction, but it'll give you an additional methodology. It'll give you an additional digital backbone to be able to display such things in such a way that people can really easily and quickly receive and absorb the information. If you've ever, for example, tried to look at a path of construction by reading a 200-page schedule versus a good, well put together 4D video, it's much, much quicker and easier to understand the plan with a good graphical aid. So even before you get to that 3D model and that 4D playback, O3 has what we call on plan, where we can start with just something as simple as a plot plan, drawing out these areas, linking these areas to the different construction work packages, starting to do some basic visualization and playback of sequence using these areas, the different colors representing the amount of work hours in each area, for example. So you can get value in this even before you've got a 3D model, just by doing some of this early phase planning. Challenge 5, disparate tools and software. A lot of companies have a range of tools that they use for project execution. You've got a document management system, you've got a materials management system, you've got a 3D model, you've got a schedule, you've got Excel spreadsheets galore, I'm sure. And the problem with this is you have siloed departments that perform these standard tasks. Everybody's sitting in their bubble, in their world, and they're managing their thing. So what we don't always see is great interaction between these tools or even sometimes these departments. For AWP to work well, the tools have to talk to each other, and people need to be able to share that data. It's no good to me to have a schedule that doesn't represent the path of construction and an estimate that doesn't reflect the durations in the schedule, etc., etc. These things need to be able to talk and function together. So how do we get around this? How do we conquer this challenge? It's a question of integrated delivery. So the first thing I always tell people is draw out your technology map. And that's what the screenshot on the right is. So in this example, on the left-hand side, we've got these are the products that are provided by the owner. On the bottom, this is the stuff coming from engineering. On the right-hand side, we've got the things that are coming from the construction contractor. And we're showing the flow of that data into O3 operating as the AWP software. And what we're showing is not only the direction of the flow, the ones going inwards to O3, but also in some cases you can see from the double-headed arrows, information is flowing both ways. And we're using the colors of those arrows to represent the transfer methodology. Is it being done manually, semi-automated, or fully automated data exchange? So you need to show what data needs to move between the various tools. You need to be able to link those tools and systems to create a coherent AWP approach. You need to have a system like O3 that pulls it all together. And you'd be able to share data either using, as I say, manual or automated links, so that in some cases, if it's only a rare amount of information and it's not big information and it's only being exchanged every once in a while, you can use a manual approach. For things like your document management and your materials management, you want that automated link because there's going to be a lot of information flowing back and forth, and it's going to be a very frequent transfer. O3 has a software called On Target, which is what we use for things like team boards, action tracking, and we actually run our implementations of our software for each new client using these team boards. So this is where we will track all the different integrations that we have to do. We need to link to this tool, we need data from over here, and we can manage those tasks directly within O3 using the On Target software. Challenge 6, reluctant contractors. I've met a few of these in my time. Unfortunately, some contractors, like I said earlier, are only doing it because they're told to. The contract said we have to do AWP. The owner is normally the one, the owner, or in some cases the EPC, whoever has control of the project for its entire life cycle, is typically the one that's pushing for the use of AWP on a project. So some contractors will inevitably just, frankly, nod their head. Yes, 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 we do it, especially if you're telling them during the bid stage, yes, yes, we do that, no problem. And then they're already sitting there trying to figure out ways that they can get around doing it. So how do you deal with reluctant contractors? Biggest thing you can do is have clear language, clear expectations. Make sure AWP is identified as a requirement in the bid package. We talk about contract language, but they shouldn't hear about it for the first time in the contract. The first time they should hear about it is right in the bid package. So when they first hear of this project, the first time you introduce them to it, we should have wording in that bid package that says, this project will be using AWP, and here are our expectations for how it's going to be run. And then include it as part of your contractor selection assessment, exactly as you would do by looking at the quality of their bid, their safety performance and other projects, their pricing structure, all of that. Add AWP as a requirement and as a consideration when they're bidding to you. Now, if they're not experts in it, but they're keen to learn, that shouldn't rule them out. But you at least want to make sure that they understand that their capabilities and their willingness to adopt AWP is going to be a consideration in you choosing them for this project. Stipulate the use of AWP directly in the contract. So yes, you put it in the bid documents, but make sure it's in the contract. If it's not in the contract, they don't have to do it. They won't do it simply because you asked nicely most of the time. These are just the reluctant contractors. Some contractors will do it as a matter of course. This is just for dealing with the reluctant ones. So make sure it's clearly listed in the contract, and make sure that contract language is sufficiently detailed. If you simply say, do AWP with no detail as to what that means, they're going to come back and say, yeah, sure, we'll do it. And then 6 months later, you'll discover that their understanding of do AWP is just, we pulled a few drawings together and wrote the word IWP on the front. You need to be very, very clear what your expectations are so that they understand they will perform to the level of your expectations, however high or low you set that bar. You want to be able to also include KPIs to track their adherence to the process. So tell them what you will be measuring them on. Here's what we're going to be looking for. Here's we expect your IWPs to be ready and constraint-free 21 days in advance of the work happening. We expect IWPs will mostly, not always, be between 500 and 1,000 hours as a standard. We expect you to maintain a 30-day backlog, or all of these things. Whatever you're going to be monitoring them on, whatever you're going to be rating their performance on, tell them. But make sure you know what those KPIs are so that you can understand what things to be tracking them against. O3 also provides what we refer to as a data specification. That's going to be able to tell your contractors what data is required. So this is typically things like the engineering contractor, where we can tell them exactly what data we need from the 3D model, from the materials management system, from the document management system, in order to make AWP digitally effective. So make sure that that's provided to them early on, make sure they understand what the requirements are going to be. And we also have videos to explain the value of AWP to reluctant contractors. So again, this wouldn't be the first time we've been asked, this wouldn't be the first contractor that we've dealt with that said, I don't really want to do this. Oftentimes it's a question of explaining the value to them and making sure they understand how it'll help. So there's a link down there to the YouTube video for workforce planning for contractors. That'll explain to them what the value is in AWP and how it's going to help them, not hinder them. And again, O3 uses the on-target software, and what we typically do with this, with a number of our clients, is we'll use this for that early digitization. Get people used to working in a tool like this, in a database that's online. You can do risk management, action tracking, RFIs, simple things that'll get them used to, especially construction contractors who may not be familiar with online tools and digital capabilities. You can have some fairly simple things that'll get them used to working in a tool. Start with RFIs. RFIs are great. Everybody hates managing RFIs because it's emailing things back and forth. It's maintaining a spreadsheet. You never know whose desk it's sitting on. Doing that in O3 means you will immediately be able to see what's happening, understand where it is, understand what status it's in. The system tracks all the dates and the assigned to activities. You know exactly what's going on at all times. So that's a very, very easy path in for a lot of contractors that they'll be able to see immediate value from. Challenge 7, realigning engineering. Traditional project delivery normally sees in the early phases of a project, engineering are, along with the owner, the ones on the project, and they're performing the work in their own sequence. they are determining based on their experience and skills is the best way to execute this work. Construction, historically, has just received whatever it gets. Construction will just be delivered some information and told, typically the normal answer I always get is, we gave you some drawings, why aren't you welding yet? So it's just, here's what we've got for you, deal with it. It's what we refer to as a throw it over the fence mentality. It's just, here's what we've got for you, go build something. It does not help successful project delivery. That attitude of just give construction whatever they've got and let them figure it out seems like a good idea to some people, but it does not help with that execution. So the solution for this, path of construction. This is the easiest way to get construction involved early in the project sequence and let them tell engineering, here's how we want to build this. It's an amazing experience when you sit with a construction manager. I've sat with some who are, 30-year industry veterans, and you say to them, how do you want to build this? And they've never been asked before. They're used to just dealing with whatever you throw at them. And you actually sit them down. First time I did it, the guy was looking at me like I was crazy. He didn't know what I was asking. It's great. You can actually sit down and say, forget everything. Tell me what's the right way to do this. So the path of construction is the most important deliverable for AWP. If you do not get a good understanding early in the sequence, how you want to build it, your AWP setup is always going to be somewhat flawed. So what it is the preferred sequence of installation. Like I mentioned earlier, is it we want to build from north to south, left to right, up to down, whatever that sequence is. We want to build this area, then this area, then this area, then this area, whatever that reasoning is. You're giving construction an opportunity to say, without significant constraints, what sequence do you want to build this in? And then the next step, once you have the path of construction, you need to then align it back to the path of engineering. Engineering needs to understand is the order in which we've got to provide these things to construction. For this to be effective, the path of construction can't sit there and be ignored by engineering. It's only effective if it's brought back. And engineering and procurement should be involved in it. Let the construction people drive it, let them lead it. But engineering needs to be involved. They need to be able to point out logical constraints and issues. Let the procurement people throw up, well, hang on a sec, that thing's going to take 18 months to fabricate. You should even bring in your commissioning folks to start talking about what's the turnover sequence. None of these entities should exist in isolation. Then make sure it's reflected in your schedule. It's not going to help if you've got a path of construction that says one thing and a schedule that says something completely different. Make sure those two documents are singing from the same hymn sheet. O3 can help with this by visualizing that path of construction. You can put together a very, very powerful 4D animation, so you can take your model, tie it to your schedule, and you literally watch the thing being built over time. And as you're doing that, it will always, always trigger people looking at this thinking, oh, well, hang on, actually, if we did it that way, that might be easier. Can we move that first and then do this? Your path of construction by the end of the feed stage should be Rev 10. You should always be looking to improve it during pre-feed and feed, or FEL2, FEL3. But by the time you get to the end of feed, lock it down. So this is where we can use some of these tools, in this case on design, to help us to understand, here's what construction is looking for, here's that preferred sequence of installation, and then we can start to map out the engineering requirements to support that. We can understand the constraints on engineering, we can understand the constraints from engineering to construction, and we can make sure that those packages are aligned in such a way that the engineering is delivered to support that sequence for construction. Challenge 8, measuring the results. It doesn't matter if you've got a brilliant AWP program. If somebody asks you, was it successful, there's only one way you can really answer that question. You have to be able to measure the results. A lot of people, a lot of organizations undertake this, and they say, we're going to do this. We know it's a good idea. This is a great idea. We're going to do AWP. And they have no system in place for measuring the results. So when somebody, senior management, says we spent X number of dollars on workplace planners, what did I get for that? What have I got to show for it? oftentimes there's no good answer. You get anecdotal evidence. You get somebody from the field, the construction manager comes back and says, oh, that was great, it was so much better. Doesn't help. I mean, it's always great to hear it, but for senior management, they're going to always want to know, what was the payback? How much did I save? What was the value in this? Did it improve my safety performance? It's not all about money. Did it improve my safety performance? Did it improve my quality? Did I turn it over on time? All of these things, but also you're obviously going to be looking as well for that productivity. So what's the solution to this? Key performance indicators and dashboards. So those key performance indicators are going to be a way that gives you a standard and consistent list. So you can get a setup to say, on every one of our projects, we are going to track these same things related to AWP. Then you'll be able to compare your projects against each other, which ones are doing well, which ones need additional help, etc. The CII subcommittee, which O3 had chaired, created a list of those KPIs. There's a link to it in the text below that diagram there on the right-hand side. So it's called the Maturity Level Benefits Tool, and it includes KPIs for measuring implementation and effectiveness. So you need to look at these two things differently. First thing you're measuring is, we've said we're doing AWP, are we actually doing what we said? And then look at, okay, is it actually effective? Is it helping? Are we saving money doing this? Then you can take your KPIs to the next level. So a lot of people will start their KPI management just using a spreadsheet. To do it really well and to do it much more efficiently, you can use O3 software that will track these KPIs automatically for you. You don't need to go and load in data. All the work packaging data is built right into O3. You get live, up-to-date, automated KPIs. You can customize the dashboards to show just the information that you want to see. And it makes it very, very easy to then report back to management. In fact, management can open up O3 themselves and see the KPI dashboards. So this is where a lot of these reporting capabilities really come in useful. Set up a standardized dashboard to say, this is going to be my KPI screen. And I'm going to show these same KPIs in all of my projects. You can see the various KPIs, you can see the project by project comparisons, and all of this is done automatically using pre-existing, what we refer to as widgets in the dashboards themselves. Challenge number 9, AWP skeptics. So on any project in any organization, excuse me, you will encounter people who are AWP skeptics. Right? These are people who, when you try to implement it, they're the ones who are saying, I don't really want to do this. They are just reluctant in a lot of cases. For a variety of reasons, they just don't want to participate. Depending on who they are, depending on their role in the organization, this can be a big problem. If you've got one project engineer who's a bit reluctant, you can work around it. If you've got a project manager or a construction manager who's reluctant, that's going to scupper your plans for implementing AWP on this project. If they don't believe in it, if they don't understand it, they're not going to agree to do it, or they're going to be a significant thorn in your side. So what's the solution for skeptics? Again, a lot of this boils down to understanding and education. So the first thing, and we did a webinar about this recently, which is that link there. The first thing and the most important thing is understand the reasons for their reluctance. Not everybody is the same. For some people, it might be, I just don't understand what it is and I don't want to ask because I don't want to look stupid. Others, it might be, a friend of mine told me that they did this and it didn't go well, so I don't want to try it. There's a host of reasons, and you cannot fix their reluctance or their skepticism until you understand what those reasons are. So understand the reason and then address that root cause. A lot of time it just comes down to education. A lot of time it's things like, I'm worried that this thing's going to take away my job. I don't want to ask stupid questions because I don't understand what it is. Sometimes it's a question of sitting with people one-on-one in a room and just explaining it to them. I've done meetings with people or teams or organizations where the first time you bring it up, it's like, no, big problem. And then when you actually sit down and go through the basics of it and say, right, we're going to do this path of construction and we're going to build work packages. And once you explain it in simple, clear English, a lot of the time people just turn around and say, oh yeah, okay, that's good, no problem. So a lot of the time it's just getting over that initial hump of resistance. So like I say, we did a webinar on this recently. It's available on our website. There's going to be a link in this presentation slide deck, which Tori will send out after today's session. And for this, one of the things you can do to show value to these skeptics and show their use case of AWP is going to be presenting them with just some information about how it's structured, how it's set up, how it's going to be able to impact them, what it's going to do for them. So something as simple as this sundial diagram is showing, here's our work areas, here's our work packages for construction work packages, and then here's our installation work packages. So for those people who aren't familiar with the hierarchy of how it works, maybe that's an area of reluctance for them. You can use the technology to provide very, very simple, easy to follow understanding of what these are going to be. And then you can click on one of the work packages, go view it in the model, really show them how graphical and useful this packaging concept can be for them. Last but by no means least, and in true sequence fashion, turnover systems becomes number 10. A lot of people think that AWP stops at mechanical completion. A lot of people view sort of the construction phase as soon as I've got my paycheck for the final thing, I'm out of here, it's somebody else's problem. What we're doing by doing that is we're failing to address the need for proper planning for turnover systems. So we're not spending enough time looking at the testing, commissioning, and the startup. The simple fact is the project is not done until the facility is ready for startup. You know, the owner can't turn it on and start earning money, which is, let's be honest, in a lot of cases what they're doing this for, until such time as they can get the product flowing. So AWP needs to be able to look at everything right up to all the way to the end of system completion. So the solution is facilitating the seamless switching from bulk construction to system construction. So what we mean by that is identify your systems and subsystems, build those directly into the model, have it attributed directly in the model. We always look for attributes in the model for the construction work areas, for example, construction work packages, but I also want to be able to see systems and subsystems identified at that component level in the model. So make sure that that is contained as a data attribution at the component level in any of the model files. Then you need to have your commissioning and startup folks identify the handover sequence. What do we need first? And you need to be able to communicate that information to the construction contractor. We need utility systems first. You know, we need the instrument air, we need the glycol line, blah, blah, blah. You know, whatever that sequence is, you have to tell them so that they know what you're going to need and in what order. They also need to understand what makes up those systems, what's contained in each of those systems, which is part of where having it labeled in the model will definitely help. Then what you can do is use what we refer to as a data-centric approach by having that information at the component level. And by component, I'm talking about every spool, every piece mark, every cable in the model, everything, every little element in the model. So if we've got that information at that component level, you can build your work packages using bulk construction and area-based methodologies, the most efficient way for as long as possible. But you can still do that whilst viewing the information from the system perspective. So you can build your IWPs and then you can be looking at 6 weeks from now, we need to hand over the instrument air system. And I can look at the model just from the view of that instrument air system and say, here's the IWPs that's still out there that have got parts of this system in it. Are we going to be ready on time? Do I need to go and steal some bits out of those different packages and put them into a system-specific package? Especially once you start getting into things like hydro testing, that's where you're getting into that switch from bulk construction base to more of that system-based testing and turnover approach. And what O3 can do here using our on-start capabilities is map out that transition. So we can help to create those test work packages. We can say, here's all the bits of all the various IWPs, and you know, a bit of this one and a bit of this one and a bit of this one go into this testing package. So here's when you're going to be ready to do this test. You can see the relationship between that installation work and the testing work, and then the testing work to the turnover. So it gives you a very, very powerful tool for managing the transition and flow of that information from bulk construction all the way through to system and completions. Okay, that was our top 10. So quickly, we will run through the key takeaways. There will always be a range of challenges when you introduce AWP to organization. It's not going to be something you just write on a whiteboard and everyone claps and you move on. There's always going to be things that you need to do. There's always going to be hurdles to do. You will typically need time and energy, as with any sort of transition process. A lot of these challenges require a different response. You need to have a good understanding of the AWP process to be able to craft an effective response to each of these challenges. If the challenge is data, where am I getting my data from? If the challenge is people, how can I help or educate them in understanding AWP? The one good thing to note is all of these challenges have been done in the past. They've been overcome in the past. You are not the first person trying to do this. Don't feel you need to recreate the wheel here. There's a lot of information out there as to what these challenges are and how they can be overcome. And using O3 is going to vastly improve your capability for overcoming these challenges. So O3 is built on AWP best practices. So immediately with a digital solution like this, you're going to have a big leg up in terms of accelerating your AWP maturity and being able to get on quicker to actually realizing the value. Okay, that's it. So we're now at the point where we switch to the GoToWebinar control panel, and hopefully some of you have been populating questions as we go. So Tori, have we got any questions?
Yes, thank you for that. Great information, Andrew. I've got a few here. We're going to start with who is responsible for overcoming these challenges?
Best case scenario, if you're an organization and you're starting this out, look to hire or look to get an AWP manager, an AWP champion. So this is not a part-time role for a project engineer or a project manager that they do 5 hours a week or something. Typically at an organizational level or on a big project, you want a dedicated AWP manager. And this is going to be the person who's responsible for creating your processes, educating your team on what all of this is, helping get that set up and that framework and that digital integration, supporting the digital tool and the setup of that tool, becoming the champion for explaining all of this to your contractors, making sure it gets into your contract. All of the stuff that we've been talking about, that should be the role of an AWP manager. Now, AWP manager is a very recent thing. I mean, I did that role for 6 years. It's not something that's easily defined. It's hard to figure out where you fit in the org chart. You know, it's a bit of a new role to a lot of organizations, but it's going to be a very, very critical aspect of how you succeed and get over this.
Okay, let's see. Another one. Who should hold the technology on the project?
Well, excuse me. Typically, the technology would be held by whoever has the greatest vested interest in AWP. I mean, normally what we find is it's the owner or the EPC. They're the ones who are responsible for the full life cycle. They're the ones who are getting the various contractors and stakeholder groups into the tool. So they're the ones who are going to have best control over it. And they want to see what's happening. They want to be able to see in real time where their project is going, what information is available.
Okay. These challenges involve multiple stakeholders. How do they all gain access to the same software?
Yeah, absolutely. O3, for example, uses what we refer to as an unlimited user license model, which means you get the software for the project, and then you can have as many people in it as you want. AWP is a collaboration exercise. You do not succeed by only letting 2 or 3 people play in the tool. Everybody who has any role in it, even if it's just something as simple as somebody who owns a couple of constraints, should have access to and availability to use the tool. You can set the tool up in such a way that they are compartmentalized. They can just see the parts you want them to see. So if you've got 2 or 3 different construction contractors on the same project, you can set it up so that they can't see each other's stuff, but the EPC or the owner can see everything, and then each of the contractors just gets put in the place that you need them to be.
Okay, one more question. How does AWP integrate with BIM?
Well, typically they're kind of apples and oranges, because I mean, industrial construction, BIM is, from my understanding and experience of it, more to do with the like buildings and infrastructure side of things. The concept could imply very, very well. I mean, certainly what we're talking about is getting data from a model, getting drawings, getting materials, and sequencing work. So from an AWP perspective, there's no reason that that can't apply to a range of different industries and a range of different tools and products like BIM. So it definitely can be done, but oil and gas construction is where the lion's share of this has started. We're slowly seeing moves for AWP into infrastructure, you know, commercial real estate space, that sort of thing. But it's been a slow progress.
Okay, I think we'll have time for maybe one more. So in a contracting landscape, what if there's one that doesn't want to work with AWP?
All about timing, in my experience. If you mention AWP during the kickoff meeting and you've already awarded them the contract, it will go down very badly. Any reluctant contractor will jump on that and just say, oh, this is extra work, this is change, this is whatever. It's a question of timing. So if you get it in front of them during the bid stage, like I was saying earlier, then they're still in that sales mode. They're still in they want to answer yes to your questions. Tell them what your expectations are. Make sure it's in the contract, and then it just becomes like anything else. It's like a pipe spec. You know, you have to put end caps on the pipe during transportation. We don't want to. Well, it's in the contract. You have to. So, I mean, obviously you prefer them to be encouraged and inspired to do it, but if they're not going to be encouraged and inspired to do it, sometimes you have to have it succeed despite them. So make sure they understand why you're asking, make sure they understand the value, put it in the bid, put it in the contract, and use it as an understanding of, you know, which contractor you're selecting. If you're going to select a contractor that you know doesn't want to do it, you're going to have to spend more time and more effort controlling them, monitoring them, and keeping an eye on them.
All right, well, I think that is going to do it as far as time for questions. But if we did not get to your question today, please reach out to us. We have many ways you can follow up. You can see here we've got case studies, past webinars, tons of videos that are very easy to quickly learn and watch and understand more about just AWP in general, and then how O3 supports your project. And you can connect with us on social media, that way you never miss another update. And then same thing with our newsletter. We send one out once a month via electronic mail. And visit our website, you know, www.o3.solutions. And then you can contact Andrew Foy here with any of your burning AWP questions. It's andrew.foy@o3.solutions. Note that there's no .com on that. So anyway, I think that's going to do it for us. Thank you again to Andrew for presenting. We have lots of great information that we can all walk away with here. And I'd like to thank everybody that joined us today on the call. And have a great holiday weekend to those in the U.S.
Thank you all.
Bye.